Hey everyone, welcome to Penny's Mind Files Method, the podcast showing you where the off ramp to the healing highway is when you're stuck on the life sucks road that goes nowhere. In this episode, we're going to dig a little deeper into the It's All My Fault file. In episode 10, we took a look at the importance of maintaining and reassessing our personal boundaries, and also how being lenient with people leads us to resent them for our being lenient. If you haven't listened yet to that episode, I encourage you to go back and have a listen. Actually, if you haven't listened to all the previous episodes, you might want to do that because it takes a little bit of time to fully understand the Mind Files method. Everything helps, right? Okay, so when we think about fault, the word itself is associated more often than not with being a bad person. Now, I touched on the word association in episode 10, but just briefly. But this time we're going to dig deeper and figure out how the word fault is associated with being a bad person and how shame and guilt and all those other negative emotions get attached. And then finally, how to go about resolving the mind file. Remember, all of our mind files are created at the end of every experience at the level of comprehension that you had at the time of the experience. So think about the first time that you recall being accused of doing something that you shouldn't have. How old were you? Most people can't recall experiences prior to age 3. There's some, but it's really rare. So let's just go with age 3. Let's say that you were accused of doing something that you shouldn't have. Who accused you? This is important because if it was a sibling, it wouldn't have lasting effects unless their approval really meant something to you. And at 3 years old, not likely. It's only when somebody who means a lot to you accuses you of doing something or saying something you shouldn't have, because now that person is disappointed in you, maybe even angry with you. Now, that's most likely a parent, somebody who you believe is supposed to love you no matter what. They're supposed to love you unconditionally. Now, here's where reassessing a mind file from an informed adult perspective can be challenging, maybe even a little confusing. You see, at 3 years old, you don't understand unconditional love. It's not possible to understand everything that goes with unconditional love. All you know at 3 is that your parents are supposed to love you no matter what. So when they're disappointed in you or angry with you, that's going to cause fear, right? At 3 years old, you're not capable of reasoning anything. So although many people think that fear is tied to, your parents being responsible for your care, for feeding you and clothing you and providing a home and all of that, at 3, like, you have no clue about any of those things. Those are the kinds of narratives that get added to this file at a much later date when you're much older. At 3, all you care about is being loved. And what's your idea of what love is when you're 3? It's likely the physical sensation of comfort. Now, of course, comfort is certainly an aspect. Caring for somebody and nurturing them are things that people do when they believe that they love someone. Now, did you catch that I said when they believe they love someone? That's because more often than not, we think we love somebody, but once the strokes stop coming and we learn who that person is, we quickly fall out of love, don't we? The feeling of physical comfort, being held, hugged, and caressed or stroked, these are energetic transfers, but they're temporary. Nobody hugs and caresses somebody indefinitely, right? It's a temporary state that feels good, but that's not love. This is why when the mind file isn't resolved, and it's definitely one of the ones that will contribute to addiction and destructive behavior patterns. Okay, so you're 3 years old and you've said something or done something that you shouldn't have. Maybe, I mean, it could be as simple as maybe you were asked to do something and you just flat out said no. Maybe you talked back to your parent in a different way, or maybe you had a tantrum. The initial experience probably wasn't something really bad. It was likely something really trivial. But kids are, because, I mean, kids are supposed to just do what they're told, right? Because the parent holds the power in this particular relationship. So if you didn't do what you were told, you got disciplined. Now, discipline doesn't feel good. It's the opposite of comfort. Maybe you had a parent who was somebody who spanked. Then you experienced the physical sensation of pain with that. But if your parent wasn't somebody who did that, maybe they told you to stand in the corner, or maybe they sent you to your room, you were emotionally disciplined. Now, some people think that parents who physically disciplined their children were abusers, and that emotional discipline is somehow better and less destructive. But in reality, what you're going to see here is that both can have the same lasting negative effects, because everything depends on how you wrote that narrative, you. And that depends on your personal temperament. I mean, just think about kids that you know, right? Some are inherently defiant. They're tough from the get-go. While other kids cry easily, right? They aren't necessarily learned behaviors, tough or sensitive, although they can be coping mechanisms. But more often than not, it's an indication of who God made you to be. And both are valuable in His eyes, because ultimately both temperaments inform the whole, the unified whole. Now, we're not going to talk too much about this because it's a difficult concept. It's complicated, and we haven't gone through enough mind files yet for you to fully comprehend that unified whole idea. But it's important, why I brought it up, is it's important for you to understand that God gives you everything that you need to navigate through the life that He intended for you. Everybody wants to be accepted. The desire to be accepted and loved is universal. That's every single person. Temperament doesn't erase that desire. What it does, though, is contribute to your expectations, and in this case, of being loved. Okay, so you're 3, and let's say your mom is the most important to you. Her approval is the most important to you because you equate her approval with love, what you perceive to be love at 3. And she gets angry with you because you didn't immediately do what you were told. So if you're the defiant type, then your mind file might say something like, Mommy was angry with me because I didn't do what she told me to do right away. I was going to do it, but I was busy. I don't know why she got mad. Now, if you're the sensitive type, your mind file might read, Mommy was angry with me because I didn't do what she told me to do. I hope she still loves me. Now, let's say that your mom was a spanker and you were physically punished for not doing what you were told to do. And let's say you're the defiant type. So now your mind file might say, Mommy spanked me because I didn't do what she told me to do. Whatever. It only hurt for a minute. If you're the sensitive type, then your mind file might read, Mommy spanked me because I didn't do what she told me to do, and it really hurt. I hope she still loves me. See the difference? The defiant personality, sometimes referred to as the warrior type, accepted the punishment but didn't necessarily feel the threat or acknowledge the threat of abandonment. Doesn't mean it wasn't there, just means they denied it. The sensitive type did feel it. So both methods of punishment ultimately, though, resulted in a very similar mind file. So let's take a look at A Course in Miracles. I know I've talked about this verse before, but the very first verse, literally number 1 in A Course in Miracles says, "There is no order of difficulty in miracles. One is not harder or bigger than another. They're all the same. All expressions of love are maximal." So whether you were physically punished or emotionally punished, doesn't matter. It's irrelevant because they both result in a fear file, right? They both result in a file that gets filed eventually in the fear cabinet because it's not positive. But here, it's the last sentence in this verse that's key. All expressions of love are maximal. So, what does that mean? So, this is important for a lot of reasons to understand this because a lot of the things in our society was built around Christian beliefs. I know people get their arms up about that, but that's just how it is. Way back, everybody in the, that were setting up our countries in the West, they were mostly Christian. Almost like I'd put it at 95%. That's the difference between then and now. So that's why it's important to understand expectations of people in society because they're all kind of biblically based. So let's look at this and see if we can understand it. So in the Bible, in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 7, verse 15, Jesus says, "There is nothing from without a man that can, entering into him, can defile him. But the things which come from a man, those are they that defile the man." Luke chapter 6, verse 45 says almost the same thing, a little different. It says, "A good man out of the good treasure of his heart bringeth forth that which is good. And an evil man out of evil treasure bringeth forth that which is evil. For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks." So these two quotes are from the Catholic Douay Bible version, which is an older translation. So let's look at a Protestant Bible. This is the New Living Translation. These same verses, here's what they say. And the Mark one says, it is what comes from inside you that defiles you. For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, wickedness, deceit, lustful desires, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these vile things come from within. They are what defile you. And the verse in Luke says, "A good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. What you say flows from what is in your heart." Notice how different those translations are of the same verse. So there's two really important things to notice. One, the older version leaves it up to you to figure out the meaning behind the words that are there, and the newer one gives you somebody's explanation. So the second thing to really consider here is, what are the mind files of the people that are translating those? What's in them? Because remember, what we send out and what we receive are all dependent on the filters attached to the narratives in the filing cabinets of our mind. So what do you think that the dominant emotional filters are in their files? So how do either of those biblical statements relate to expressions of love? Well, because love is an energetic transmission that converses with all that is. God is the name that we give the power of creation, which is all that is. So let's look at how that works. In the Protestant New Living Translation, the writers actually listed all the things that sit in a person's heart that are evil. Evil thoughts, greed, wickedness, deceit, envy, pride, etc. Now, if we look at the emotional filter frequency scale, look where all those things are at the bottom, right? Now, I know that if you're listening to this on Podbean or Apple or Spotify, you can't see what we're looking at, those of us on YouTube. So if you're a visual learner, you might want to watch this video at a later date on YouTube when you have a chance. Okay, so love in the spiritual sense, not the human sense, the spiritual sense, which is where all of our laws and everything start with, right? You're supposed to love one another like you love your neighbor. It's the spiritual intensity of the emotion that you assign to words. That's what it is. Words make up thoughts, thoughts create beliefs. In the Mind Files method, we call those beliefs rigid perspectives. So every time your mind's process references a mind file and agrees with it, without question, which it almost always does, you add another emotional filter to it. So let's dive a little deeper into these emotional filters. I touched on them in episode 3, and for whatever reason, I wasn't even creating visual aids back then. So you wouldn't have gotten a complete picture of how these filters work. Emotional filters beneath neutral, look where neutral is, about where the heart starts to start mending, all those ones accumulate. They're layered. That's why they get so intense. Every time that your mind's process agrees with the emotion it assigned to the narrative, which in this case is the narrative that a 3-year-old kid created when their mom got mad. So let's say that you're the defiant type and you assigned apathy to that first narrative, right? Remember, it said, Mom was angry with me because I didn't do what she told me to do right away. I was going to do it, but I was busy. I don't know why she got mad. You unknowingly added guilt and shame because apathy, not caring, whatever, it's that whatever, includes guilt and shame. Because all the emotions beneath neutral, they're all layered. They include all the emotions beneath them. So what about the sensitive kid? Well, that narrative said, Mommy was angry with me because I didn't do what she told me to do. I hope she still loves me. Well, guess which emotions are tied to that? Well, guilt and shame for sure, and likely grief and fear, which already makes that mind file more intense. And it's only the initial one, it's the first one. It hasn't even been referenced and reinforced yet. So, why would fear be attached? Because of the statement, I hope she still loves me. That's a fear statement. So, the author who writes that is fearful that, wow, I did something and they got really angry. Maybe she doesn't love me anymore. On the emotional filter frequency scale, fear includes all of the emotions below it, which are grief, apathy, guilt, and shame. Its frequency, though, is the accumulated energetic output of all of those emotions vibrating all at the same time. So you see, the explanation of love in the spiritual context is different than a human context. In the spiritual context, love is energetic frequency that you return to the most often. It is your dominant mind files. So the next time that your mom gets mad at you for whatever reason, when your mind's process references that initial file and agrees with it, which it almost always does, you add another filter. So if you're the defiant type, another apathy filter got added, which increased that intensity, that emotional, energetic intensity threefold, because apathy is the third emotion on the scale, right? But if you're the sensitive type, look how intense, look how many filters that is. Look how intense that is. For those of you who can't see it, it is stacked with a lot of filters. Okay, so let's say that you're 12 and now your mom asks you to do something and you don't do it right away. She gets angry. You're older now, not mature, but you're older. You've got more experience behind you, 9 more years to be exact. So, what's the narrative that you create this time? And what are the emotions that you add to that narrative? Because here's the thing, every additional narrative added to the original mind file will have additional emotional filters attached, which does what? Increases the intensity of that file exponentially. So add up how many narratives, along with their emotional filters, are inside the file that deals with your mom being mad at you or disappointed in you. Okay, so let's go back to that Bible verse. What's in a man's heart, as in human, those are the things that can defile him. What you send out into the universe, meaning the energetic signature that you transmit that comes from your dominant cabinet and the dominant files inside the dominant cabinet, which for most people is your fear cabinet. Can you see now? Are you beginning to understand how important it is to go back and review and reassess and resolve those files as an adult? Because here's the thing, it's impossible to shift your life for the better without going through this process. So let's go back to A Course in Miracles. Verse 2 says, miracles as such do not matter. The only thing that matters is their source, which is far beyond evaluation. And verse 7 says, miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. So in this spiritual context, what's a miracle? It's God's grace. It's what you receive when you ask from a genuine desire to resolve that mind file, to understand it and heal all the emotions within it. It's that aha moment when you see what you thought was the truth of the past isn't the truth at all. The aha moment is what resolves that mind file. And that is the purification. You see, it's not you that was defiled. It was your thoughts, your memories, your childish interpretations that ran amok because they weren't intentionally reassessed from an informed adult perspective. And this is important, and from a genuine desire to heal. Because if you don't have that, it ain't happening. So let's look at where the genuine desire to heal sits on the emotional filter frequency scale. It's above neutral at willingness. You have to be willing. When you are truly willing, you're going to start to ask the difficult questions of yourself and your beliefs and your rigid perspectives. You will begin the process of reviewing and reassessing the files in the filing cabinets of your mind. But you're not going to necessarily get the answers. You might not receive the miracle until you're a little higher up at the scale at acceptance. They're really close in frequency. They kind of go hand in hand, right? Because you can't receive a miracle if you're not at a vibratory, an energetic vibratory place where you're willing to accept it. That's it for today, folks. I hope you heard something today that spoke to your heart and motivates you to begin the Mind Files Method process. If you're watching on YouTube, please help me reach more people by hitting that thumbs up. Better yet, get in the conversation. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment below. If you're listening on Podbean or Apple or Spotify, share this podcast with your family and friends and reach out to me on social media. You'll find me on Facebook and Instagram at the tag at ACESI Book. So tag me in a post and ask a question or make a comment about this episode. Have a great day, and remember, you are the author of your life. You have the power to shift from survival to self-trust. See you next time.